Get ready. You're listening to Give God 90 live.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
All right, here we are, live on a Thursday night once again. Thank you, everyone, for showing up, and all those who are about to show up. I know some people will. Let me think. Today is Thursday, right? I said that already. Mm-hmm. My name is Jerry Mitchell. Sitting beside me, my lovely, talented, and out-of-work wife, Myra. But you're not out of work because of the current situation.
Right.
You've been out of work for a little bit because you had a work injury prior to COVID-19. So Don't forget that. Hey, Haley, thanks for joining us tonight.
Hi, Haley.
We are live on Spreaker or your favorite podcast platform, as well as on Facebook. So as I'm trying to keep things organized, I guess is a good way to say it. We'll get started here.
Hi, Pam.
Give people a chance to show up. Something very important is happening tomorrow night, and that is we are going to be broadcasting the Messianic Delaware Fellowship live, both on Spreaker and on Facebook. But on Facebook, it's going to be on my personal page. Hey, Wes is there too. Good to see you, Wes. So as we do that, it'll be interesting. Let's just put it that way. So for the folks who are used to having us usually on just Give God 90 and talking about that kind of stuff, we're going to be actually doing all of everything tomorrow night that we usually do for Messianic Delaware, but because of what's going on, that's not going to be happening because we're kind of under a keep yourself at home situation.
Right.
Other than that, that's the big news. So if you need to download the Give God 90 app, you're going to be able to do Messianic Delaware the same, because it's going to go out on the same platform. And it'll be available whether it's Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio. Oh, it's on YouTube too, on my YouTube channel. I don't say that very often. Probably don't say anything about my books very often that I need to. So they're out there. Tradition to Truth and God's Universe, God's Rules. Make sure you read them. They are especially important for today's time because some of this is what we're going to talk about tonight very shortly. Last week, I made the comment about we need to, when you're cleaning, right? You don't just spray it on and wipe it off.
Right.
Guess what was on the news this morning? That's right. Our local news did a story, and I think it was carried through their national syndication as well. And they're talking about the major cleaners. When you spray it on, it takes almost 10 minutes for some of those high-octane cleaners to work. So you spray it on, you leave it for a while. Or, when you use the wipe things on your phone or your computer, whatever you use to wipe things on, you also have to leave it there because it takes time for those little microscopic microbacteria virus type things to do their battle. So as they're fighting and one is winning and one is losing, it just takes time to wage war. It's that simple. So don't forget, give it time to work. Wanted to make sure that I really hit that hard first thing because, one, I didn't want to forget about it, and two, it's important. If you're going to clean properly. I know Haley's listening, and she's probably going, yay, don't use Lysol, right?
Definitely not Lysol.
That stuff will hurt you. Anyway.
Yep, she liked that.
She liked that. Also, there's some things that have been going around that I'm going to get into in a little bit. Don't be terrified right now. Don't panic. Now is not the time to panic. It's the time to think. And that's why the title for this particular podcast, Silly Church, it's time to live out your faith. Now that is not being facetious. It's serious. What do we need to do? You're moving
Your
microphones.
face disappears.
Oh, don't worry about that. I have a face for radio, right?
Yeah.
So as we now I've lost my where was I? Oh, okay. So as we look at these things and we're not being afraid, now that doesn't mean that we do dumb stuff either, okay? So we've got to have that balance. How do we protect ourselves? How do we protect the people around us? How are we faithful to the Almighty? And how do we fit all that in with all the regulations, while at the same time being aware that there are people out there who are trying to make money off of your fear, okay? So in that, we can get started now with you reading out of Exodus. And the reason we're going to read out of Exodus, you're going to see where this goes very quickly. And you're going to start in chapter 19, and you're going to read verses 1 through 9.
In the 3rd month after Bnei Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, that same day they arrived in the wilderness of Sinai. They traveled from Rephidim, came into the wilderness of Sinai, and set up camp in the wilderness. Israel camped there right in front of the mountain. Moses went up to God, and Adonai called to him from the mountain, saying, "Say this to the house of Jacob, and tell Bnei Israel that, Israel, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and now I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now then, if you listen closely to my voice and keep my covenant, then you will be my treasure from among all people, for all the earth is mine. So as far as you will be to me a kingdom of Kohanim and a holy nation. These are the words which you are to speak to Ben Yisrael." So Moses went, called for the elders of the people, and put before them all these words that Adonai had commanded him. All the people answered together and said, "Everything that Adonai has spoken we will do." Then Moses reported the words of the people to Adonai. One more.
Through verse 9.
Adonai said to Moses, "I am about to come to you in a thick cloud, so that the people will hear when I speak with you and believe you forever." Then Moses told the words of the people to Adonai.
Okay. While you were reading that, Robin and Jay joined us. So glad to see
Hi, Robin.
you guys.
Hi, Jay. Hi, Tina.
And
Hi,
I'm sure
Carol.
Tina and Carol are there too. Okay. Lots of stuff going on there. They come to the mountain, and God says, "Moses, I'm coming down, and you're going to get them ready." More on that in a minute. The reason I wanted you to read that was I got an email this week. And when I read it, I'll be honest with you, I was not a happy camper. Okay, it's that simple. I was not a happy camper. And it's not the only one I got like it. I got a couple of them and some other things that are going on, and it's what is coming out of the pulpits in some, not all, thankfully, but some churches today. Just not satisfactory. It's that simple. It's just not satisfactory. One pastor wrote this: "God's word did not come to us as a disembodied voice booming from the clouds." Now, he just told you he's going to show up in bunch of smoke, right?
Right.
Well, if we go further into chapter 19 down into verse 20, if you start chapter 20, if you start in verse 16, the morning of the third day there was thundering and lightning and a thick cloud on the mountain, and the blast of an exceedingly loud shofar. All the people in the camp trembled. They were absolutely terrified. Hey, glad to see you, Steve. These folks knew what was going to happen. They just didn't realize how it was going to happen. Okay? Then Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God, and they stood in the lowest part of the mountain, and now the entire mountain of Sinai was smoke, or, something you can't see through, right? Because Jehovah had descended upon it in fire. So here's the smoke and the fire, and he's in this ball of fire. And what happens next? Oh, this is good. I like this story. And it's getting to the time we tell this story every year. I'm sorry, I just really like this story, this lesson. When the sound of the shofar grew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and God answered him with a thunderous sound. It wasn't this meek little, oh, come here. It was, hey, Moses, do I have your attention now? If I was good enough with the podcast stuff, I could do the reverberating voice. I can't do that, though. I'm not that good. But he's up there. He's shouting down what he's doing. He came down on the mountain, and Moses went up. And Jehovah spoke to Moses, go down and warn the people, lest they break through and see me, and many of them die. Even the priests who came near to Jehovah must consecrate themselves. They had to be ready. They thought they were ready, but they weren't ready. So Jehovah does not break out against them. Then we get to chapter 20, verse 1 and 2. And I mean, this just says volumes right here. Out of the clouds, God spoke. Anochi Yehovah Eloheka. It's a very, very formal greeting. He introduces himself so formally and so loud, so thunderously, that the people were terrified. They were starting to, do we really want to be here? And they're starting to shrink away. And he's speaking and he's shouting down, I am Jehovah, your God, that brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. He literally introduces himself as a disembodied voice from the clouds. Sorry, Pastor, you failed Seminary 101. If I was teaching, you would fail. Not only would you fail my class, I think you would fail the Almighty's class. Because right here in Exodus, we see exactly, the opposite of what you write. That God's word did not come from us, or did not come to us in a disembodied voice booming from the clouds. Yes, it did. Pastor, you failed. You failed us, you failed your congregation, and you failed your Creator. It's that plain and simple. And I'm getting wound up talking about this guy. I've never met him. I've never met this fellow. He may be a really nice guy who just doesn't understand Scripture. If so,
he needs to stop.
The congregation needs to stop paying him. It's that simple, because he doesn't know what he's saying. Another one I got was about communion. Because with the COVID-19 virus going around, right, churches can't get together. And there's this big question in this particular denomination about, can we offer communion online? I'm not sure how you do that, though. I gotta be honest, I'm not entirely sure how you do that. But anyway, they have been doing this. And it creates a problem. Now, of course, there's no such thing, really, as communion. The disciples were not having communion. That is something that the church created. Let me say that again. It's the church that created this. And it says, this is what it represents. And I don't have time to go into all of that right now, or I will be way past the time I intend to stop tonight. The disciples weren't having communion. It was the Last Supper. And Yeshua was teaching them that he represents the bread. He represents the cup of the new covenant when he confirms the new covenant. Remember, he says, here, you drink this. I'm not drinking it. When I drink it, that's the confirmation of the new covenant or the renewed covenant. He's going to reconfirm the covenant that was established at Mount Sinai. But there's certain denominations that treat this as, a magical incantation. Let's just say it that way. It's a magical incantation that they say over the bread and the wine, and all of a sudden, it changes properties. Doesn't really do that. And it really doesn't make sense because no Jewish person in the history of the world would ever say, eat my flesh. It just would not be done. Okay? It's that simple. It goes against the very thing that he represents. Mm-hmm. He cannot be the Messiah. He cannot even be the prophet Moses spoke about if he ever would have said, eat my flesh, drink my blood. Not done. But yet there's this big argument over this. And the really weird thing is, can you use that magical incantation that certain denominations do to consecrate the elements through cyberspace? Can a pastor in his church consecrate the elements in front of him and put it out just like we're talking now over Facebook Live or whatever they're doing, and have whatever you have sitting in front of you be okay?
No.
Okay? It doesn't work that way. It can't happen. Primarily because, well, there's no magical incantation, right? And it just doesn't make sense. People have to realize this stuff has to make sense. But that doesn't make sense. It makes almost as little sense, really. A friend of mine this morning sent me a video, and he said, I need your input on this. There's people that are talking about this. I need somebody that can give me some direction. And it was talking about the drug they're using for COVID-19, the chloroquine, right? And what they're trying to do is equate this chloroquine, which really technically isn't the name of the drug, it's the very shortened name of the drug. For the people on Spreaker, Jay just asked, does the church make sense? Some of them do not. Thankfully, some of them do, but some of them just plain don't. This drug, chloroquine, is a shortened name of the drug. Some aspects call it hydroxychloroquine, but the technical name of it is actually aminochloroquine. All it takes is about 20 minutes on the research, and you can figure this stuff out. What his question was, is they're proposing that this drug is named after the pale horse of the apocalypse, because chloro in Greek is green, which, the pale horse is actually green. It does say chloro in the Greek Bible. And queen comes from the word equine, meaning horse. So it says the name of this drug is literally green horse. Well, that only works really in English because it's going to have a different technical name in a different language, right? Mm-hmm. They might what's the word I want? Transliterate it similarly, but some languages aren't going to be able to use it as what we say it. The other thing is, not everything is about the horsemen of the apocalypse. Mm-hmm. It's that simple. Not everything do we have to equate with that. The virus, it's a virus. It's been here. I read it's a 20-page technical article in the Journal of Virology about the avian coronavirus, which occurred a few years. Remember the bird flu is what they called it? Remember the bird? All the chicken houses. We live in a very poultry-centered part of the country. All of the birds, all of the chickens were going to die. We were going to starve to death because all the birds were going to die. And what they figured out in that article was amazing. The actual title of the article is "The Avian Coronavirus Infectious Bronchitis Virus Undergoes Direct Low pH Dependent Fusion Activation During Entry into Host Cells," if you want to look that up. 20 pages. It will cure your insomnia. Trust me, it will cure your insomnia.
The key is keep a high pH level.
Yeah. I mean, basically, the good Jewish doctor Otto Wattenberg in 1934 had it right. He said no disease can live in an alkaline environment. So anyway, this particular drug chloroquine or aminochloroquine, it actually works by interfering with the biosynthesis of nucleic acids on the protein level. Isn't that fancy? I'm glad I could read that. Sometimes when we get so upset, we get afraid and we'll believe anything that we hear that sounds maybe kind of good. And we got to get over that. We've got to stop thinking, well, if it sounds good, it must be. That's somebody tickling our ears. That's somebody telling us what we want to hear. That's somebody saying, oh, that's just so wonderful. Well, it's not all that wonderful. Now is the time not to be gullible, not to be deceived, not to be fooled. If you hear something that sounds too good to be true, chances are it's still too good to be true. Okay? Why are we so afraid and why are we so terrified that even probably good people who happen to be, and I hate to use the term ignorant, but ignorant really means you don't know. And that's technically what it means. People who don't know, they're ignorant of facts, make statements, they do things, they say things, and as the leader of a group of people, that's a dangerous, dangerous place to be in. Okay? It boils down to fear of the unknown. You don't know what's coming. You don't know what's going to happen. And what it really comes down to is people are afraid to die.
They are.
They say, oh, we're ready. We're ready. No, you're not.
But not now.
What's the song? Everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to go now, right? Don't worry. If you have that certainty and you are living the way your Creator designed you to live, you don't have anything to worry about.
That's right.
In Deuteronomy 28, we have a really, really good example of if you do what I say, you don't have to worry. Because in Deuteronomy 28, Moses is speaking out, and he says, if you do not take care to do, that means apply, right? All of the words of these instructions, the things written in this scroll, to fear the glorious and awesome name of Yehovah your God, then Yehovah will make your plagues and the plagues of your descendants extraordinarily terrible, and prolonged plagues, severe and prolonged illness. He's saying, look, if you don't follow my instructions, it's going to be bad with you. Before I keep going here, let me say this. Chances are the pastors out there who are leading people in fear are not leading people in God's instructions. They're trusting their denominational rules, regulations, maybe the bylaws of their church to get them by. That's not what gets you by. Over and over and over again, we see in the Bible that it is the instructions we get from God to live exactly the way He created us to live, the way He designed us to live. And if we don't, that's when we've got something to be afraid of.
That's true.
In verse 60, he will bring back on you all of the diseases that you were afraid of, and they will cling to you. Deuteronomy 28, verse 60. He will bring back on you all the diseases of Egypt that you were afraid of. Also, every illness and plague that is not written in this scroll of the Torah, Jehovah will bring to you until you are destroyed. Is that a warning for then? I've heard it said, now that the lady that used to be famous in one of the churches we went to for saying this, oh, that was for those people at that time. And it worked really well for them there. This is for us right now. I mean, we can live by this right now. Short story is, if you want to do things your way, you're going to suffer your way. It's that simple. It's that simple. If you want to stay in Egypt, if you want to go back to Egypt, he'll let you. You know, go right ahead. Go right ahead. Not a problem. We'll let you go back to Egypt. It's fine. You know, we can't do anything on our own and expect it to be worthwhile. We must learn to be fully reliant on God. That's the frog method. Fully rely on God. The frog method. It's simple. One of the plagues of Egypt was frogs, right? Well, they should have learned. But now is not the time to be afraid. Now's the time to stop and to think. Double check what people are saying to you. Double check what people are saying to you. Check what I say to you. I mean, that's the challenge I put out in both of my books. You don't have to agree with it, but if you're going to argue with me, argue Scripture with me and tell me where I'm wrong. Nobody has yet. Not saying they can't, not saying they won't, not saying there's something in there I messed up. But as long as I keep repeating what the Almighty says, it's going to be hard for me to mess up. So, that's pretty easy. Remember, you can depend on what God really says. Not what we think He says, not what we wanted Him to say, but what He actually said. And sometimes the things He actually said is tough. Sometimes the things He actually says is hard. You can't depend on the rules and regulations of your denomination. You can't depend on the rules and regulations of your government. I don't care who's sitting where. You can't depend on it. The only thing you can depend on is the Almighty. You can depend on Him so much. Then I'm going to touch on just a little bit of something I'm going to talk about tomorrow night when I look at the last part of Revelation, what I call the complete restoration. We finally get to the end of the book of Revelation. And usually I go back to Genesis when I talk about something, because the answer is always in Genesis, but this time I'm going to Exodus. Exodus 32. The people have just got done with the golden calf. God's looking down there going, I can't believe I just told them not to do this, and they're doing this. And He gets livid. He tells Moses, I'm going to kill them all. In chapter 32, verse 31, Moses returned to Jehovah and said, Alas, these people have sinned greatly and made gods of gold. Gods, plural. Okay? Yet now, please forgive their sins, but if not, blot me out of the book that you have written. Jehovah said to Moses, Whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out of my book. They're talking about the book of life. Talking about the book of life. The book of life is so important, God holds it in His hand. Satan might have put the seals on it, but He holds it in His hand. Moses said, Look, I'm too old. Count me with them. Just take me out of your book. Count me with them. I'm willing to go with that group of people because I'm no better than they are. And the Almighty responds with, Whoever has sinned against me comes out of my book. You have the opportunity, you're the only one who has the opportunity to take your name out of that book. If you want your name removed from the book of life, that's up to you. You can do that. I don't recommend it, but you can do that. One of the things I want to hopefully get you to understand is this scroll is huge, and it's written on both sides. And if you can picture something that is absolutely enormous with names written on it, To me, the Vietnam Wall came to my mind, right? The name of everybody who died in Vietnam, their name is inscribed on the wall. I want you to picture something even bigger than that. And now, picture this. Leave a whole lot of blank spots through that. Maybe, I don't know, where there's space for maybe 10 names, just wipe them out. Because those are the people that stood in opposition to the Almighty. Maybe, you can leave one or two names there and blot out 15 or 20 more. Until you have maybe 5 out of every 100 names. I don't know. We're not given the figure. But every name that's written from Adam to the last person that's being born right now, their name's written there. You have the opportunity to make sure it stays there. You have that opportunity to make sure it stays there. There's a lot of people out there right now that are saying, oh my, I've got family. I don't think their name's there. And I pray every day, Lord, you've got to show them the way. Maybe you need to change your prayer. But before you do that, I'm going to tell you something that you might not understand. You have to be ready, willing, and able to accept the responsibility of your prayer. Most people don't know that. Mm-hmm. You have to be willing to accept the responsibility of your prayer. It's that simple. Maybe you need to change your prayer from something like, oh, Lord, please guide them in the right direction, to Father, send somebody to show them and explain to them what's going on. Maybe it needs to be a little more direct and a little more important. Maybe it needs to be, Father, they're a little hard-headed, kind of like me. I said he made me hard-headed and thick-skinned. He really did. Maybe you have to change your prayer to something like, Father, you need to absolutely make sure they understand in terms that they can understand what their choice has to be. And what they're going to choose, so that they can make the decision that's right for them. Once they see that, once they understand it, the choice then is theirs. They can either accept what he's offering, or they can blot their name out of the book. Mm-hmm. That's just a taste of what we get tomorrow night. And if I finally get to the end of Revelation, and I really don't hit Revelation that hard. I'd like to, but it would take me about 5 years to do it. So I'm not going to go through that much of it. It's going to be not as in depth as some of the stuff I've done. So make sure you're willing to accept the responsibility of whatever it is that you pray for. Because we don't always get, God gives, sometimes he will say, yes, if it's my will, I will answer that, and I will give you exactly what you're wanting. But it might not be the way we thought of it. I know a lot of times people get upset and they say, oh, I prayed for this person to be healed, but you know what? God let them die. God didn't let them die. They're healed. Jay, you're like me. I ask the Father to slap me in the back of the head sometimes. Absolutely. Sometimes you have to. We're no different in a way than some of the dog breeds that are out there. When I was growing up, the saying was, you train a golden retriever with a wet newspaper, or with a wet tissue, I'm sorry. You train a Labrador retriever with a rolled up newspaper, and you train a Chesapeake Bay retriever with a baseball bat. God needs to train me with a baseball bat. It's that simple. I know I'm hard-headed. And I remember the first time I said that, God, you made me hard-headed. Hit me. And you have to be willing to accept what He gives you. Okay, it's that easy. It's that simple. But we really do. So when you make sure when you're praying that you pray for what you absolutely want, and make sure, let's face it, if it's not if God doesn't want to give you a brand new Mercedes and you keep praying for one, you ain't going to get it. It's just not going to happen. But if you say, show me, guide me, lead me, I don't know where to go from here. You point me in the right direction, I'll go down that path. You're going to go places. Trust me. Sometimes you go places you might not want to go. Sometimes you might come back to places you might not want to come back to. But here we are. Did you have anything? No? You're all done. You're just willing to sit there and look good. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we certainly appreciate you joining us this evening. Everybody that joins us this evening, everybody that's going to join us later. It really does our heart good. Don't forget those like buttons and share buttons. They're important to us. And hopefully, come back to see us tomorrow night. Because...
yeah. Be blessed and stay well.
Stay well. Wash your hands, wash your face, all that good stuff. Until next time, we wish you many, many, many blessings. Take care, everyone.
Good night.